Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Allison, and it's Where I'm From 129 with Joanna, who will be here any moment. What have you been reading? I have been reading Viet Thanh Nguyen's new memoir, A Man of Two Faces. And it's subtitled A Memoir, A History and a Memorial, and it's about his relationship to his mother, his relationship to the English immigrant, and all of those things. And it's obviously a deep dive into so much of our country's history and Vietnam's history, and it's wonderful. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, so nice to see you.
You too. I wore a dress in your honor, but you can't really
Oh,
tell.
oh God, I am not, wait, there's my face. I am not wearing a dress because it's like 0 degrees out and I
Yeah,
live in Boston.
yeah,
I do sometimes wear dresses around the house.
yeah.
But today I'm home with a sick child and have to walk my dog every hour. So I'm wearing a
Every
fur.
hour.
Well, I'm exaggerating. He's a very large dog. He'll probably wander in here and really cooped up because I can't like leave my child to take him
Yeah,
to run around. So
yeah,
taking him out as much as I can, like on these little tiny micro
yeah.
walks. So anyway,
Well, I understand why you're not wearing a dress. It just looks like I'm wearing a t-shirt, but I also am a fan of dresses and have been my whole life. And I was what was called a tomboy, a word we don't really use anymore, but
yeah.
I still wore dresses. And so I do all the things, play in the dirt and the mud, run around, tackle boys, but be wearing a very lovely dress while doing so. So they're comfortable.
Yeah, I definitely same. And even like one of my dress stories is that I feel more comfortable in dresses and I think I felt like they suit my body shape more or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
when my oldest child is a boy and I would like he would go to the playground like in New York where I lived or here and be like chasing after kids with like giant sticks and like getting covered in mud and whatever. And the other moms would be wearing like jeans and like old t-shirts and whatever. And I would be wearing like a dress and like giant platform shoes. And I didn't really think that much about it, but then occasionally there'd be like a moment like at my son's first soccer game when I was like trying to get on his shin guards and I didn't know how and all the moms were like looking at me like what is going on here? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like what planet are you visiting from? Like, and
I
anyway.
didn't wear dresses for years for that reason, and because I had a child who really liked to get in them. And I just really felt like that was more than I wanted to share with people I was just meeting. So
Yeah,
I wore a lot of pants during that time because otherwise, yeah. So
I get
anyway,
it.
I always enjoy your posts, and I think dresses are, they're for everyone. They're wonderful.
It's true. It's been really weird, like how influential
Hmm.
that has been. Like it just in terms of like people buying like a specific dress that I'm wearing.
I see
Um,
that. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That
Um,
must be kind of surreal.
it, it is.
Hmm.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's really and like it's fun, but also weird. And then also like people, I turned a lot of people on to a couple of kind of like independent
Mm.
designers and had like a really profound effect on them. I was
Oh.
surprised by it. This one designer, Batsheva, in particular. But also just, people will send me, I mean, constantly send me just photos of themselves saying like, oh, I haven't worn a dress or a jumpsuit
Hmm.
to somehow falls into that
Hmm.
bucket, like in years and like seeing you wearing them. Like I bought myself this dress, at this shop in my town and I'm like,
That's really sweet.
it
I
is.
I haven't gotten on the jumpsuit. I'm very worried about the bathroom for some reason. Like what? Because I go often. I know this isn't about poetry. We're gonna get there, folks. But you know, um, yeah. And I have a friend who's a costumer, and she's very big fan of jumpsuits. Like she has more jumpsuits than I have probably clothes.
No, I think they're really good if you're on set. Actually,
Yes,
like I
yes,
true story, I posted a photo in my stories of a jumpsuit that I wore to AWP and
yes. I saw that.
makeup artist I know was like, I love this, I'm gonna
Mhm.
buy it. And she actually bought two. And and I said like, this must things like this must be really good for being on set all day. And she was like, yes, they are, because they're so comfortable. And I noticed on the My Salinger year set, like the cinematographer, and a lot of the sort of women in the crew were wearing overalls and jumpsuits.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about like having your waist not
Mm-hmm.
be constrained that might be really
Yes,
comfortable
it's
per day.
and they're really long days on set, right?
Yeah,
And if something is chafing, it's not good and it will cost you later.
exactly.
Um, and there's that very iconic picture of Greta Gerwig in her pink jumpsuit on
That's
Barbie.
true.
And
Yes.
I love that she had so many hot pink. I feel like, she took the color back for all of us, and I appreciate that because as you can see in my where I'm from childhood photo, I am holding a Barbie and grew up
Yeah.
obsessed with Barbies. So anyway, you have a picture of Raggedy Ann. That felt like some synchronicity, synergy.
I have like a whole bunch, I mean, tons of photos of me with my Barbies too. I almost sent one to you actually of me with like this line of Barbies. So yeah, I love them too. And I owned two hot pink jumpsuits before pre-Barbie, long before Barbie. Please steal
Okay.
that from me.
Yes, she saw you. She saw your Instagram. I,
Yes.
I mean, I would love that if that were true because I admire her greatly.
My
Um,
son was her stepson's camp counselor. So
it's not beyond the realm of possibility, is what you're telling me. Okay, we'll just hold it. We'll hold it as possible. Um, okay, well, would you like to read your poem, Joanna? I have read
sure.
it. It's beautiful. I'm excited.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, you just went quiet for some reason, just at this moment. Oh, okay.
I've never done one of these before. My kids have all had to do them in school, and I never have. So who knows? Okay, let's see. Here we go. Where I'm from. I am from ordinary paper into which ink seeps and bleeds, from L'air du Temps and Lipton onion soup. I am from the forested valley north of New York, where I spent Sundays with my grandmother in the apartment that would be mine at 25. I am from the bay side of the Cape, its smallest inlet, where marsh joins ocean, where my kids swim each summer plucking snails and crabs from puddles. I am from the Seder table and the longest, most circuitous stories told in tandem over whole afternoons. I am from Phyllis and Stan. I am from laughter at anything, but perhaps not everything, and walking everywhere and always. From You're Too Sensitive and Practically Perfect in Every Way. I'm from a restless people taught to question everything, to never settle for the easy answer, the people of the book. I'm from a tiny town on the Hudson, Nyack, but I am really from the Lower East Side, where my family lived over a century and a quarter. I'm from not Russia nor Poland, where my great grandparents originated, but from some nebulous, murky subset of America. I'm a New Yorker, a Jewish variety. I'm from Prune Danish and Bialys, fresh strawberries and oranges arranged by my mother on a decorative plate. From my father's last stand-up routine in the Catskills and my mother's tantrum at age 12, which led her aunt to lock her in a closet until she apologized, except she didn't. She wouldn't. I am from the pages and pages of photos preserved under clinging plastic, compiled by my mother in her retirement, stashed in the left-hand cabinet in my living room. My own photos are, of course, in color, but I find myself as much or more in her crumbling black and whites. Okay.
Beautiful. Um, I really loved the sense of history sort of echoing through time in your poem. I felt so much of not only where you're from, but where your whole family and all of you are from. And it's something that occupies my mind a lot these days. So I really felt that so strongly. Was that intentional, or were you aware of it when you were doing
Um, it was not
it?
intentional. I tried to, I've had this form for a while and I kept down to do it and just kind of freezing
Yeah.
up. And I think, I haven't I started off as a
Yes,
poet.
I
I
knew that. I mean, I know
uh,
that since I read your book.
um, I think I published my first poem in second
Amazing.
grade in my school's literary, but and then continued to
Hmm.
and published in sort of small magazines, and then did an MFA in poetry. And I think maybe in part because of like my actual age, like the sort of pedagogy at the time, like the teaching of poetry and the feeling about poetry was always to kind of like resist the
Yeah.
obvious, like resist the cliche, to work against it.
Hmm.
And it felt to me like everything that I started to fill in felt like a cliche to me. And so I ultimately forced myself to do it very quickly, like within half an hour, and forced myself to write it out by hand because I knew that I would. I was initially trying to kind of like do
Hmm.
it on a, not even how I normally work, but I don't know. I was thinking it was just an assignment, and I just somehow can't.
Yes, I assigned it to you.
So I was thinking things through. I think I was really trying to put down the first answer that occurred to me. And I don't know if that's the right way to do this, but that was what I did in
Hmm.
order to not spend another like 3 months
Hmm.
thinking.
Isn't it fascinating? I mean, I love just talking to people about their relationship to the prompt and their relationship to poetry because I feel like so many of us have this really complicated relationship with poetry. And I'm so grateful to Georgella for writing this poem and being so generous with it. Um, and when have spoken to her, we talk about pedagogy, and she's just like, forget it. Like, like this gets in the way of us expressing ourselves, which is the point of poetry.
Yeah.
And she shares it and teaches it with so many children and teens. And I wish I had had someone like her in my life because most of the people who taught me poetry distanced me from it and eventually sort of, I mean, I eventually just let it go because I was like, I'm not a poet. Um, and it's sad.
Yeah, I mean, it was similar for me. I mean, I before I started my MFA, I went to Columbia. I was in a doctoral program actually
Mm-hmm.
for literature at CUNY Grad Center, and one of my peers there, one of my fellow doctoral students, was this incredible, like, brilliant woman who I was a little scared of, and she eventually, we eventually talked, and sort of became friendly,
Mm-hmm.
even though I was always scared of her, um, and she revealed to me that she had finished her MFA at Columbia in poetry, and I. I talked to her about it, when I got in. I didn't tell her I'd applied, but when I got in, I got a fellowship, I told her, and she said, I thought she would be like, yay,
Mm-hmm.
but instead she said, yeah, you go to Columbia to get your MFA in poetry. Basically, you never write poetry again once you leave. And I was like, what? And I was so
Mm-hmm.
shocked. And, and she was like, yeah, I'm excited for you. Like, if they gave you money, that means you must be good. But I don't know if she was really, and I was like, that's not going to be me. But then within a little bit of getting there, I kind of understood what she meant
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Yeah.
And it definitely sort of like distances you from poetry in all different ways. Definitely, like, one thing that I didn't really understand, like, I started this program having, been in academia and also worked in publishing for
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 years at that point, and I felt like I understood, the link between like commerce and literature. Like, I didn't, it wasn't like some shocking thing to me or anything, and I had no problem with it. I was like, the cream rises to the top. Like, you write a good book, it's going to be published. I really did feel that way
Yeah.
from reading Slush and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in my poetry program that I began to feel like grossed out by the kind of capitalist part of the literary
Mm-hmm.
world, which is ridiculous. But I just felt like there was such
Mm-hmm.
competition for like the favor of one of our professors who was the poetry editor at the Paris Review.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone, there was so much like networking and going to parties and trying to kind of like cozy up to people. And it's really like something that I'm not good at. Like, maybe that's why I hate it, but I'm just bad at it. I'm bad at asking for
I think it
favors.
feels disingenuous, at least for me. Like it just feels like, well, these people wouldn't be talking to me if they didn't see it as transactional, and it just feels icky, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
And it's a hard way, I think, to live and be creative, honestly. Like I think it's hard to maintain, like I don't know, like be with your voice and be honest with your voice when you then are performing another person to try to sell your voice. Like the dissonance is deafening. At least that was my experience. It was like,
no, hard,
I don't know.
so
Yeah.
hard. You're right. I feel that way about so many things. Like I feel that way kind of a little bit about like social media.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to sort
I
of support
think
life.
that's why I'm
And
grateful I have this because I actually genuinely enjoy this and it's something I can do. And I'm not, I don't have to create something to post.
right, right,
And I'm
yeah,
very grateful for that because that's
yeah.
exhausting. You know, like
It is.
to feel like you need to do that regularly. Obviously, sometimes things organically appear that you want to post about, but not often enough, at least in my experience, my life, you know. So it's nice to just have something. Okay, well, I'm doing this thing I love. Show up or don't. It'll be of value to me either way because it has literally changed my writing and my writing life and my relationship to words. Like just sitting and talking to someone and listening to their words once a week and making that a priority,
Oh, I
it's
love that.
special.
That makes total sense to me. Because the equivalent things in my life
Mm.
are that are like so I used to support myself as a journalist, like in a like I didn't go to journalism school, like magazine writer sort of way, like not in like a reporting on war
Right.
sort of way. Um, Sometimes when I say that to people, they're like really impressed. I'm like, no, I just like had a professor who was like, "Do you want to review a book for my friend who needs someone?" I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, it's like," but I loved writing profiles, and I want the professor who said that to me was a New Yorker writer who was kind of known for profiles, and she taught a profile writing class at Columbia, and it was my favorite class. And I think because I just love talking to people. I am that person who, like my friend Lauren and I joke about this, that we're the kind of people who like we go out for coffee with someone new, and then sometimes we'll leave and realize we spent 2 hours with this person we don't know that well, and all we did was ask them questions and didn't say anything about ourselves. And like I have that reporter sort of like instinct, and so but those profiles that I wrote for years, you know, that was a lot of what I did while I was writing my first book,
Mm-hmm.
and it really did help my writing. Like I learned something just from the act of sitting down with people, even if like I wasn't really that interested in the person I was
Mm-hmm.
profiling, just like the act of learning about them, figuring out who they were, sitting down and talking to them, seeing like the gap between like who they seemed to me before I met them versus
Yeah.
who they were, and then figuring out how to turn their life into a 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 word story, was so exciting and instructive. But now, I don't do that much of that anymore. And in fact, I do almost none of it. But I do here in Boston, I'm asked pretty often to like be a conversation
I
partner
see
with writers at bookstores.
that. I wondered if you were going to mention that because I can see the relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I've cut back on it a lot because,
The
and I don't
homework.
know for you,
I don't
it's so
have homework.
hard.
It's great.
Yeah, it's like, depending on who the writer is, there's always work
Yeah.
um, of different sorts. Like sometimes it's a writer who's written a million books.
Right.
It's really similar. Honestly, I used to write a ton of reviews, and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
similar to that. Really think through what you want to talk about with
Mm-hmm.
them. And sometimes I just want to like enjoy those books as a reader,
Yes.
and um,
Yes.
but the positive side is that, you know, often I would say most of the time I come away from those conversations feeling really energized and excited. And
Mm-hmm.
I like, I'm so glad that I did them. And, they go in directions I didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect. And just that kind of intimate conversation, even though it's a public
Yeah.
conversation, they're often really intimate and important. Um, you know, it really kind of I don't know, it's almost like it resets
Mm.
me in a way, like it's like setting a reset button, no, like pressing a reset button on
Yeah.
life, kind
Yeah.
of.
I understand what you're saying about also wanting to just read the book because I read a lot, and every once in a while people ask me, "Oh, do you want to write reviews?" And I'm like, "No," because this is my thing that I just enjoy. Because I my MFA is in film and television, and it has taken me years to be able to watch a movie and not just pick it apart, like to just enjoy. I mean, I still am the person who's like, "Oh, come on," like, my kids can attest to that. But I can enjoy it a lot more than I could back then. And I feel like with books, I want to maintain that relationship. I mean, I am thinking about them critically, but it's different to write about it than to just think about it. Like
Yeah.
that step is it makes it all more concrete and more difficult, I think, to separate yourself from in a way where thinking it is one thing, writing it is another. So I understand what you're saying, and I just enjoy reading it and sort of letting it wash over me, have some thoughts, write a few thoughts down, but not a review. Because also, I don't like to say anything negative about other people's writing ever, or really their creative work, because I know that whatever it is, someone poured their heart and soul into it. And,
Oh,
you know,
uh,
it might not be my cup of tea, but like nobody puts out something and says, "Oh, this is kind of garbage." Like that's
true.
that is not how they feel. And so I try to really respect, and this does come from my MFA and just my creative life, that they, for the most part, I mean, film and television, it's different because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but um, same with editors. But they wanted to tell this story this way, and so they did. And this may not be the way I would tell the story. I might not even tell the story. But if it's not for me, it's not for me. It doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I have really that I believe strongly, and so that's also like I just want to leave 5-star reviews if I'm leaving a review.
I,
you know.
you know, when I started working as a book critic when I was very young,
Mm-hmm.
25.
I would have been great at it then because I was much more confident that I knew what I was talking about. now I got a lot more questions.
Well, I guess I think what has happened is that I worked my way up kind of quickly, from writing like for like the San Francisco Chronicle to writing for the Times and Newsday, which at the time was helmed by an incredible editor named Lori Muchnick, who now is the head of Kirkus Reviews and really transformed Kirkus Reviews into like something
Mm-hmm.
incredible. And but she's an unbelievable editor, and she really mentored me. And when I wrote for them, like they had such an incredible stable of writers, like Claire Massoud was like one of my, like we were reviewing things back to back, and like Claire Dieter, like so many great people.
Mm-hmm.
And and they assigned me, looking back on it, like major books, and I was like 25, 26, 27. And now I feel like, oh my God, like if like the New York Times assigned like my new book to some 5-year-old that I never heard of, who had never written a book, I would be like furious and so upset. And
Yeah.
I wrote like definitely some very negative
Mm-hmm.
reviews.
Yeah.
And that like I stand by those reviews. Like I recently did like a radical cleanup of my basement and found like boxes and boxes of
Mm-hmm.
clips,
Yes,
and
physical clips.
yeah,
That was a thing.
was
Mm-hmm.
the 90s, the early aughts,
Yeah.
all of, and I saw, I'm like almost like scared to admit this, but like for instance, I gave a scathing, like this book is terrible review to The Kite Runner. Um, and I think that book is terrible. And a funny thing is that my mom, who was like a reader of
Mm-hmm.
commercial fiction,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a huge bestseller,
Mm-hmm.
and she read, it, not really being aware that I had reviewed it, because like she just like she didn't. What I did was not real to my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a lot of like, why don't you go back to school and be a teacher? Like they didn't know. Like writing for like Vogue, they were
Yeah.
like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
nice, and so um, she read it and she was like, I read this book that like everyone is talking about, and like all the women in my community, she lived in a retirement community, they're all reading it and everyone is crazy for it, but I thought it was terrible. Like writing was so bad, and like on and on. And I was like, whoa, because my mom is just like a person, you know, and it was like, wait, maybe like I was crazy. And I gave a lot of kind of like scathing reviews that were like pretty measured, because I was coming from like a kind of academic background where like you're not going to write this book sucks, like you're going to kind of like try to figure out like what the writer is doing, you know, what their objective is, like are they doing what they set out to do, like how does this fit into like the larger scheme of literature and whatever. But by the same token, my editor's take on things, especially I remember my editor at the LA Times was very much like, if this book is bad, we should give it less space. So sometimes that context got cut out, you know, and it was just like, here's what the book is about. It sucks, you know, and it's why. And I do feel like once I published my own first novel, I was much less able to be as kind of distanced from what I was writing about, because I felt so aware of the work that had gone into these books. Like I worked on it for 7 years. It was like I actually did not read any reviews of it at my editor's suggestion, but I know people would like send me reviews or they would post them on Facebook. Facebook was the thing, and
never send someone a review of their book. That's why I shook my head, because it's like, if they want to read them, they will read them. If they don't need me poking at them.
People would literally not send them to me privately,
but
but
tag
like,
you.
you know, like whatever guy from like my biology class in grade, like, you know, post a review, and he probably hadn't even read it because some of them were not positive. And like I would be like, oh yay, now everyone sees this not super positive review that I didn't know existed. Thank you. You know, Ira Sachs from like AP English 10th grade or whatever. But I felt horrified, you know, by like in particular, like there was one, it was like Gawker or The Cut or something that kind of wrote a very dismissive review, and people were so excited that they reviewed it that they were like posting it. And I remember my editor called me and was like, so whichever one it is has reviewed it, don't read it because it's really mean. And I think
yes, and they can be so mean. And I, as a person who knows, I don't also post negative things because I know so many people who work on so many different things. But it's like, for me, it's more film and television. It's like, you know, like hundreds of people worked on that really hard, and it took years. And there's just so many forces at play that create something. And so, but yeah, I'm laughing so much because at that same age, I was certainly much more full of confidence and like, well, if I made a film, it would be
it would be perfect.
it would be perfect. There would be no issues with the storytelling. And my Kite Runner was The English Patient. I really, really didn't like that movie.
I also hated that movie. And I hated that book. I hated the movie.
I then read the book because I was like, okay, maybe if I read the book, I'll appreciate the movie. No, not so much. But that Seinfeld where Elaine hates The English Patient, I felt so seen because I wasn't reading really much critical. And honestly, the critical reception to it was off the charts. And Anthony Mingala was a very talented filmmaker. I didn't like disagree with any of that. I just found it interminable. It's like, oh my God, we're still here in the desert. Oh God. Plus, I hate love stories. I mean, except for your essay. I want to give a shout out to your essay in Wanting about your love story. I thought it was such a beautiful piece, and it is so hard to write about love.
It is.
And you did such an incredible job. I really could just, like, the pages were just, I don't know, they were just love. And I have a long love in my life, and I never write about it because I don't know how. I mean, it's just intimidating. So,
No,
congrats.
very hard. I recently, I think yesterday, Zibby Owens, who owns Zibby's Bookshop
Yes.
by you and, is whatever, she has this essay in Vogue
Yes,
about basically
I saw that.
like about essentially like having an affair, but it's kind of like about like how she this wonderful thing happened, but it led her to sort of like behave in ways that
Mm-hmm.
like telling lies, like keeping secrets, which isn't aren't really who she is, and like this wonderful thing engendered this bad thing. And I felt like it was such a great sort of way of writing a love story. Like I know that it's all real because she writes about it in her memoir,
Mm-hmm.
and so um, it, I'm not in any way saying like that she's sort of like skewing it so that it's more interesting, but I felt like often in love stories that kind of like ugly part is not included, and like the messiness is not there. And basically her essay is just about the
Mm-hmm.
messiness. And I loved that.
I have
And
to read it. I saw her post it, but the list of essays I want to read is there's just so much amazing writing
it's
happening.
really short. It's not long.
Okay. Okay. Noted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vogue has this love story series, which like I haven't read them all, but they're pretty good.
Oh, well, I mean I do love reading about love and it's important and it's difficult to write about in a way that isn't like the English patient. I mean, that isn't this sort of like tortured romantic love, which I'm not a big fan of as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
human being. And so it just was so not, and that was very much that time too. Like love was tortured, and that's what it looked like, and that's what we should all strive for. And it just bothered me. So,
I hadn't
um,
thought that way. I just thought it was
oh, you just muted again.
like it was just awful, you know. And all the performances seemed so overblown. Like I really hated it.
And I
And
really loved Juliette Binoche, and I was
yeah,
like very angry at how little she was used and how she was used. I felt offended. I
yeah,
took it all so personally. Like I just took art media so personally in my 20s. Um,
I know, me too. And I wanted everything to be like life changing, and just
mhm.
like mind blowing in the best way. And like I held everything to the highest
Yes.
possible standards. Like I wanted every poem to be like T.S. Eliot or whatever, and like every novel to be Mrs.
Yeah.
Dalloway. And like there was no room in my head for there being like
And
other
it's
forms of
paralyzing.
this.
Like
Yeah,
as a creative person and as a consumer, it's paralyzing. And
yeah.
I know we need to wrap up, but I just want to sort of circle back to the MFA thing and say like if anyone who's watching like or is they just like value your own voice and believe in it because these programs for me it took me years to get back what I lost in my MFA program because I was sort of trying to angle it in a way that felt commercial or palatable or acceptable that I was a radical feminist who felt like women's stories should be centered. And the reality was there was really no way to do that in a way that was going to make all the men who were judging my work happy. But it took me a really long time to realize that. And just like, but I just think it's not enough people say like your voice and what you're saying is important. And just work on that instead of trying to make it into something some random person is going to like. Because who
That is
cares?
so true. I feel like that is actually a huge problem with MFA programs.
Yes,
And also,
absolutely.
I'm in the midst of like writing a somewhat sort of like, for me, kind of like angry essay about this, but um, I feel like this is also the problem with like the whole industry of like writing coaches and book coaches and whatever, and book self-help literary books. That's not the right term. There must be some
No,
term
I don't
like
know what the
literary
literary term
self-help.
is, though. Yeah, I know
There's
what you're
so many.
saying, though.
There are like a million of them that are like, here's how to write your book. write 1,000 words a day every day, no matter what. Like, here's how to write your book. Like, write it in 3 months. Do National Novel Writing Month. Like, hire me and I'll like spend $1,000 a week and I'll,
You're literally
you
just
know,
listing things I never want to do.
I know. Well, I was aware of like the
No.
horror of all this. And
Mm-hmm.
then a couple of years ago, I taught at this like pretty prestigious, very prestigious literary conference called
Oh
Aspen
yeah.
Words. And yeah, which is like incredible. And I highly recommend it like to anyone who's thinking of doing like a week-long
Mm-hmm.
intensive thing, especially if you're working on like a
Mm-hmm.
memoir. It really is a great format for that. And um, and they often have like faculty of like very different styles. Like the other memoir person was Mark Doty, who's a poet
Mm-hmm.
and who like of a different generation and whatever. So like whatever class you landed in, you got like a very different sort of vibe and approach. And anyway, but point is that several of my students had these things in their memoirs that I was like, what is this? Like, why is this written in the present tense, for instance? Or like, why is there, all of this backstory like here and whatever? And every time I asked them about certain things that just struck me as like not working, just pulling you out of the story and also almost like working against their inclinations as storytellers and stylists. They were like, oh, I work with this book coach and she told me to put it in the present tense. And I was like, and often I would be like, who is the book coach? And they'd be like, it's blah, like someone I've never heard of. And I'd be like, oh, what are her books? And they'd be like, oh, she's never published a book. She's a book coach. She's not a writer. And it was just like, what? And so I just feel like there's this whole industry that is sort of geared toward like simultaneously telling you that like, if you follow these instructions, you're going to publish a book.
I know.
But that's not how
I know.
you write a publishable book. Like you write a publishable book by writing the book that needs to be in the world that you can't not write, that like has that kind of urgency. Like I have to tell you this story, no matter what kind of book it is, like poetry, memoir, like narrative nonfiction, whatever fiction. Like it has to have, like what's going to make it publishable is not some random person who's like taking your money, telling you to do this or that,
Agree. No, I mean, I'm laughing because I think really the reality is we all would like a formula that would guarantee our success, which is part of the reason I got an MFA. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I was a, woman in her 20s. I wanted to make films. I felt that nobody was going to take me seriously as a woman in film without an MFA. And guess what? They still didn't take me seriously. But I thought I needed that. And I think that that speaks to why a lot of people get MFAs, take these courses, have book coaches, because otherwise the work is so overwhelming and amorphous. Like just keep writing and keep creating. Like that's the advice. And it's so difficult for some people. That's not actionable.
Yeah.
Like they need somebody to turn pages into or a degree to pursue, or because getting an MFA helped me take myself seriously. And that was valuable, but it also took so much away from me at the same time that I then had to spend years regaining. So I don't know where the balance is. I want to read your essay when you write it because it's something I think about. And I just want to encourage people to keep working on their creative projects. And that's all I can really offer. And to find people you trust with what you're saying,
Yeah.
because giving it to the wrong person can really hurt you, not just creatively, but emotionally. And I've been there. I think a lot of us have been there. And I'm grateful every day for the people in my life who are my first readers and the first people I go to, because I wouldn't still be creating if it wasn't for them. If they weren't there telling me they wanted to read what I wrote or be inside my brain for a day or a minute, I would have given up.
Yeah.
And you can't buy those people.
True.
And
It's so true.
but I don't know how you find, I mean, you just do, like, that's the keep writing, keep putting yourself out there. You find them and they find you. But it's not purchasable.
Yeah. It's really true. And I feel like I just want to say before we close like that, I mean, I loved my MFA program and
I met my husband.
I did find mentors. Yeah. And I still have friends from it who
Yeah.
are readers, and feeling like I was, like my peers were these people who I thought were incredible writers
Yep.
was amazing. And I also, definitely just, I don't know, like I still feel part of the larger
Mhm.
community from the MFA
Yeah.
program, and which is kind of like a wonderful, lovely feeling. Like I'm friends with people who weren't even there at the same
Yeah.
time with me.
Yes. You do speak the same language,
Yeah,
I think, when you go through a system like that.
it's true. And but same thing like with places that I've taught, like at like whatever, like Aspen Words, Brooklyn College, wherever, like I feel such a connection to my students and the people I taught with at those places. And so I think that like I don't think that any of these things, any of these kind of like institutional methods for getting yourself on track are wrong by any means. I just think they can be dangerous, like you can end up in the hands of someone who is guiding you away from yourself rather
Absolutely.
than yourself. So,
And I think I did give
yeah,
these places too much power because
yeah,
we're paying them a
definitely.
lot of money, and there are success stories everywhere related to these programs. I went to University of Southern California, lots of success stories. And so if if I mold myself into this thing they're telling me to be, then I will get the brass ring, whatever. Um, but I wasn't that thing, you
Oh,
know. I wasn't. And I'm happy with the thing that I am, but it took me a long time.
yeah,
So I just, anyway, I just always want people to feel less alone. I think that's my goal in life. And so if
that's
you,
a great goal. I feel less alone after
oh,
this
good.
conversation.
Okay, my work is done. And you just went ahead and wrote the poem. And I want to sort of take a moment to say, like, I'm so glad you did that, because can't, I don't ever want to like push people or like say, just go ahead and do it. But in my gut, I'm like, just do it, because this thing that you're accessing is real. And it informs the person that you are today. And what a privilege to get to listen to it and talk to you about it. And I'm grateful that you did it
Oh,
and that you're here with me. So
thank
thank
you.
you.
It was really fun to do, and
Yay.
it was almost like I was doing it kind of like on
Yeah.
autopilot, and then afterwards I was like, wow, is this really who
Yeah.
I am? Is this where I'm from? Interesting. Like,
Yeah.
so there's not that much in life that's like that, so much is like
Yeah.
polished and thought through and intentional in a way, and so
Yeah. I'm your friend to bring your non-polished, non-thought through thing. That's me. I want that. So thank you, Joanna. This
thank
was a
you
real
so
joy for
much.
me.
So fun. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks everyone for joining
Bye.
us. Bye.